Now, the big reason for why we're here, and the mayor is going to talk more about this in a second, is the opportunity in the ocean economy. We know, and research and analysis all indicate that the ocean space and the ocean economy is a 3 trillion opportunity moving forward. And that's why this initiative has gotten off the ground. Now, very importantly, you are not here to listen. You're not here to listen and nod. You are here to actively shape the outcome of this process. And I hope that many of you are interested enough to continue to shape the process after these 2 days. So we have about 120 participants signed up. Right now, I'm seeing about 89 from all over the different ocean-based sectors. There's a good mix of public and private participants. We have people from all over Canada. I'm very happy to see people joining us from the East Coast. We have people joining us from Silicon Valley, from Latin America, from Norway. I think maybe there's a French person in here as well. And we're really excited to be able to bring this group together. Over the span of these 2 days, we're going to have external guest speakers. So we're going to have a Catapult Ocean Impact Accelerator joining us tomorrow. And they're going to talk about how they have built what I would probably say is the world's leading ocean impact accelerator, and how you could collaborate with such an organization on a global basis. We have with us one of the most important people in shaping the Norwegian Innovation Cluster Program, with numerous clusters in the ocean space and ocean economy. And we have with us former CEO of the Norwegian Seafood Innovation Cluster, now Innovation Manager with the Global Aquaculture Accelerator. And they'll be sharing stories that I hope you find valuable. I hope you find valuable to the work that we're doing here together. So the agenda we have, day number 1 is, why are we doing this? Day number 2, how should we do it? And then you may just get invited back if you're interested later in November for day number 3, where we kind of wrap things up. That's optional for you a little bit later on. So Mayor, with that brief introduction, we have about 90 some people. I'm going to hand it over to you for a quick introduction, and I'm very excited to be here with you.
Great. Thanks, Chris. I'm very excited to be here with you as well. Welcome, everyone. I am Lisa Helps, and I'm the Mayor of Victoria. I'm here this morning on the homelands of the Lekwungen-speaking people, and I'm just going to be very brief in my introduction to hopefully inspire all of us to work hard together over the next couple of days to lay the groundwork for an amazing transformational opportunity. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is the cover of Victoria 3.0, Recovery, Reinvention, and Resilience. This is the city's 20-year economic action and recovery plan coming out of COVID. And as you can see by the front cover of this plan, we have a strong focus on oceans. So the work we're doing here today is nested in a transformational economic plan for our city for the next 20 years and beyond. Chris, can you go to the next slide? We've created a repository for the work that we're going to be doing today and any other information coming out of this workshop on the South Island Prosperity Partnerships website. So if we'll send this URL out afterwards, but we just wanted you to know that this is going to be captured, and there'll be a repository as this initiative develops. So stay tuned to this URL for future information. Next slide. So as I said, the Ocean Futures Innovation Hub is nested in a few larger projects that are really meant to transform our city and our region over the next 20 and 100 years. So the orange bubble is the Arts and Innovation District, which involves city transformation. So for those of you not from here, that's the north end of our downtown. And really it's the future facing part of our city, what the next 100 years look like. We imagine going to the green circle, the Ocean Futures Innovation Hub, which we're here to focus on today, will be a number of buildings in that innovation district focused specifically on the blue, the aquamarine, the low carbon economy, and all of your companies that are wanting to grow and create solutions for the global market and for the future. The light blue circle at the bottom is the Ocean Futures Innovation Cluster, which is the organization will develop to structure and hold all of this work together. A focus on startups and scale-ups, of course, without losing sight of the larger companies and government agencies that we have here in the region. And then really right at the center, and this is, I think, the big picture, is ocean industry's transformation for the 22nd century. So that's why the work we're doing today is so important. It really has a reach ahead of it for at least 100 years. And we're just at the foundational moment. So we'll all be able to look back and say, I was there when the Ocean Futures Innovation Hub was founded, when the transformation of the ocean economy for the 22nd century began in Victoria, on Vancouver Island, and on the West Coast. One thing to note, as Chris said, we've got our colleagues here from the East Coast, and colleagues here from around the world. So this is not a competitive endeavor. It's to work together across the country and around the world to grow the blue economy and sustainable oceans for the future. Before Chris yanks me off the Zoom, I just want to share with you the tentative vision at this point, and hopefully that will inspire all of you to action, all of us to action. And this vision was sent out in the pre-read. So our vision tentatively at this point is that by 2030, Victoria is known globally for leadership in the blue economy, with high growth, globally oriented companies that anticipate and solve the problems of the 22nd century, creating high value jobs and leaving the planet and the ocean better than when we found them, when we began in 2020, which is today. So just go to the last slide, and these are some words of encouragement for those of us who didn't take the Miro tutorial. This is going to be new for some of us. We're used to just sitting back on Zoom and checking our email while people are talking or whatever we do on Zoom. Today is not that. Today is this interactive opportunity for all of us to roll up our sleeves together. And so my final message to you is enjoy using this new platform together. Chris, back to you, and thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you very much for that opening. And we're going to hand it over to Alex, joining us from the Association of British Columbian Marine Industries. Alex, the stage is yours.
Yes, Chris, thank you. So this initiative will lead really to the growth of a strong regional ocean and marine ecosystem that supports business needs throughout the innovation continuum. It's going to foster an entrepreneurial environment that's conducive to innovation, growth, and global competitiveness. And so I just want to, next slide, just pop through a number of points. It's going to, first off, increase the number of business resources and expertise that propel the sustainable development of firms in all stages of development, from startup all the way through to accomplished enterprise. It's going to increase the capabilities of entrepreneurs and firms, enhancing productivity, performance, and profitability, and it's going to harness creativity and imagination through learning, exchanging, and collaborating. It's going to be an incubator. It's going to launch and grow successful technology companies of the future, develop, prototype, validate new technologies, and translate new ideas into products and services, essentially drive adoption of innovative solutions. It's going to work as an accelerator and accelerate the technology commercialization and product development, and really aid startups, small and medium enterprises, and established firms in the development and commercial success of their products and services. There's going to be the common use of infrastructure, including marine access and testing facilities, i.e. test tanks or in-water test beds. And it'll facilitate access to technical infrastructure and prototyping capabilities, examples being labs, 3D scanning and printing, CNC machining, digital media labs, really all those things required to develop and beta test advanced proof of concept prototypes to increase investment in market readiness. Next slide, please. It's going to leverage common markets. It's going to be able to have shared labor pools. It's going to be linked buyer-supplier relationships. And so really leveraging this aspect of working together. Investment in business and attraction. It's going to really increase the chances for available capital for startups as well as small and medium enterprises. Attracting diverse funding and capital such as public grants, programs, supercluster funding. Private, on the private side, industry funding, defense procurement obligations through industrial and technological benefits and the value proposition, perhaps even industrial and regional benefits, going back to the old paradigm, as well as venture capital and so on. It's going to create a focal point for an ocean futures cluster. It's going to pull together sustainable ocean industry on the west coast of Canada. It's going to combine significant emerging strengths in the marine industry on the west coast, thus attracting global attention, partnerships, linkages, and export market opportunities through that global attention. It's going to develop a brand story and a value proposition to market the cluster globally and draw global companies to this local area. Next. Finally, it really matters in the context of talent attraction, work integrated learning opportunities, skills training, workforce development, and upskilling. The co-location of post-secondary programs and students in the ocean and marine space, the co-location perhaps of public fleet, or rather federal fleet, such as Navy, pursuing innovation interface with the industry, bringing those essentially the provider and the customer closer together, working with the expertise and knowledge offered by the local First Nations communities and joint ventures, participation, and opportunities with Indigenous peoples. It's going to be a focal point for women-backed ventures and entrepreneurship, enabling and facilitating the increased participation of women in the industry. It's going to be a focal point for programs designed to help startups and new ventures. Example being what the Ocean Supercluster right now is doing with its innovation ecosystem, the Ocean Startups Project on the East Coast, the Maritime Blue initiative down in Washington State, working with WeWork Labs, an accelerator program. The Cove, a NovaCore startup yard, a very similar program on the East Coast. And so again, a focal point for these programs. And finally, and an important point, it's going to coordinate function of innovation activities and initiatives in the ocean and marine space on Canada's west coast, thus creating synergy of effort and resources. And there's all sorts of activities going on in BC, somewhat in a stovepipe fashion, and this would really be a focal point to draw those activities together and gain synergy through cooperation and collaboration. That's it, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. And I know you put a lot of work into helping and get this off the ground. So it's fantastic to hear your passion for this. Very happy to have you here, Alex. Thank you. Now, before we introduce a case study from Norway, I just want to add that what we're trying to do here and what is being done by the task force is it largely follow similar models from other countries. So I'm based in Norway and like everybody else stuck in COVID, but I'm very fortunate to be able to work with the Norwegian government, governments in Latin America, governments in Africa, Middle East, Australia, shaping various economic initiatives. And we know that when we develop these economic initiatives, we get them right, they can have a significant impact. I once said that it takes superhuman leadership skills to get it right. And I'm going to introduce the next case, which I have been fortunate enough to sort of follow closely for many, many years. And it's the story of the Norwegian Seafood Innovation Cluster. Now, of course, the Canadian version of the ocean economy and the Norwegian version of the ocean economy and the French version of the ocean economy will always be different. But I really hope that you can take some learning points away from how a group of industry leaders shaped this, which is basically Norway's second most important industry today and likely to be Norway's #1 most important industry in the future. Tanya, welcome.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for that kind introduction. Dear Miro and also dear ocean friends, thank you so much for hosting this event. Super excited to be part of the project group working on this business proposal. Hopefully, my story today will be an inspiration. And also, I hope that one of my key messages is that to succeed with such an initiative, it's really important to show industry leadership. I think that's probably one of the first and important key learnings I just want to put in front there. I'm going to share a little bit about how we actually started it and also what also the value came out of it. When we started the Seafood Innovation Cluster Initiative, it was not because there was a lack of innovation in the industry. The Norwegian salmon farming history has had a tremendous growth. So it's actually a great story to tell. And the industry has also invested a lot of money when it came to innovation. So it was not the lack of innovation that we needed a cluster. What we saw was that we needed maybe a more concerted effort. And if you can see from the green graph, our growth and production growth as Norwegian salmon farming was starting to flatten out. Increased environmental issues, increased regulations, also increased social acceptance to that kind of environmental production, also increased the complexity when it came to driving new innovation into the industry. So the cluster actually came up as a result, not to necessarily only to increase the innovation capabilities, but actually to have a more concerted effort. And also what's mentioned here, the coordination when it came to innovation activities. So we saw that if we're going to overcome some of these challenges, we need to have a more concerted effort on working on our innovation capabilities. Next slide, please. At the same time, the Norwegian government and the Norwegian industry had also launched a very promising and optimistic industry report, actually showing that the industry had a growth potential of increasing its potential to the 5 times that we currently have. The big question remained, how are we actually going to enable these kinds of growth opportunities? Next slide, please. What we saw that there was a lot of strategies, and the Norwegian governments have been writing reports and reports and different kinds of strategies on how the industries is going to reach different kinds of growth targets. But what we saw was that we were actually lacking an operational and organization really trying to follow up and really taking that industry leadership on how actually to deliver on those goals and aspiration. So from the industry perspective, there were so many different kinds of strategies, but we were lacking the capacity and organization really trying to drive that alignment and getting everybody on board in one strategic direction. Next slide, please. So we started with some industry leaders. So we gathered around 4 industry leaders. These were the captains, I will say, of the Norwegian seafood industry, and really sat down with them and discussed how do you see the long-term perspective of the Norwegian seafood industry, and how are we going to achieve that kind of growth? And what role are you going to play and responsibility are you going to take to actually achieve that? So what actually came up was that, first of all, a lot of the innovation initiatives were R&D driven. So that was the first really important point. The industry really needed to be focusing on what innovation do we actually need to solve some of our key challenges in moving forward the industry. So that was really important to really improve the industry leadership when initiating new innovation projects. Secondly, a lot of innovation was invested in innovation. But we also saw that we also needed to have more return of our investment when it came to innovation. So coordinating our innovation activities and improving that industry leadership was also a really important point. Thirdly, it was also not looking just into what we need to solve on a short-term basis, but looking more strategically on a long-term basis. The cluster initiative was not about improving quarterly results, but looking in a 5-year, 10-year perspective. What are the key challenges that we as an industry as whole really need to be focusing? And we also were discussing when it comes to what issues do we need to solve as an industry in the non-competitive area, while competitive areas need to be solved in corporates in-house. Fourthly, it was also about attracting the new talents. We all are now moving into the new knowledge economy, and for an industry to grow sustainable, it's also important that we actually are able to attract talents. Young people wanted to work in the industry, but of course also talents when it comes to new entrepreneurs, problem solvers that really want to engage and try to solve the challenges. Fifth, as I mentioned, it was really important also to draw the line between what will the cluster be working on, what was competitive to non-competitive topics. That was also a really, really important discussion to really build that trust between the cluster members. And of course, lastly, how we, with a concerted effort, can accelerate the innovation capabilities of each individual team member. Next slide. So quite quickly, the initiative grew in scale, but what was really, really important was that to really get some of the key stakeholders on board. So some of the key leaders of the seafood industry was really important to have ownership into the initiative. And then we started inviting R&D partners, the entrepreneur community, investors and so on, and growing about that. But the key learnings from the initiative was it was really important to have the initiative and support from the key industry stakeholders and taking that responsibility and investment to really to grow this innovation community. Next slide. So I also was a part, the cluster was established in 2015. And when we first worked on this cluster, it was all about building an innovation collaboration framework around what we call the triple helix. This is what I would call the traditional innovation framework when it comes to increasing collaboration between the academia, the industry, and the government. This was the traditional innovation framework, and the cluster, when we first started it, that was our main focus. Then we saw that really if we're going to boost and increase our innovation capabilities, we need to build around this innovation framework model. And this is where we actually collaborated with Chris and Christian. And this is also where we saw that if we're going to increase the innovation capabilities of both the established industry, but also try to diversify the seafood industry, we really need to have a larger innovation framework. So this is where we launched a new strategy and also included entrepreneurs and capital as important stakeholders to the new innovation framework. Next slide, please. So we introduced a new innovation framework, which actually includes 5 important stakeholders. It's both the entrepreneurs, the scale-ups, the new emerging companies, the technology and problem solvers, the academics, the government are important facilitators for these kinds of collaboration, the established industry with the corporates, and the capital, the investment community. Driving new innovation and technology also needs investment. So we launched a new collaborative and innovation framework, which was a part of the new strategy for the cluster. So we went from a triple helix model to the new pentagon model. And that really increased the innovation activities within the cluster and also for the community as whole. Next slide, please. So we launched a third new business area. First of all, when we started the cluster, it was a lot of focus when it comes to building that knowledge platform of the industry, and also on how we could increase the innovation capabilities of the industry. But with the new strategy, we saw definitely the need that we also need to welcome and increase entrepreneurship and commercialization of the seafood industry as whole. So the outcome of the strategy was launching a new business and focus area. So the cluster was focusing both on larger corporates, but also on startups, and really all about increasing collaboration between these stakeholders. So a lot of the facilitating behind this cluster was about really trying to understand the key pain point, the key challenges of the industry, and matching them with new solutions that the entrepreneur community were developing. Next slide. So this resulted in an entire new different services. So within each of the 3 business areas, we as a cluster developed several new cluster projects which involve the entire stakeholder community within the cluster. So several of the services are then targeted to the business areas. New knowledge programs, new education programs, new innovation projects, and also new entrepreneur accelerator programs, and also very importantly, trying to encourage, educate, and attract more private investors, more private capital to the sector. Next slide, please. Well, we also saw that this new collaboration also enabled us to have new collaborative platforms. Based on the trust that we build within the cluster and the cluster community, we actually launched a new digital project. We launched a digital ecosystem where actually we were sharing data across the different value chain. This, from my personal experience, will never have happened without the trust from building that cluster and that cluster collaboration. So what we saw was that areas that maybe we first were discussing early on within the cluster that were maybe more competitive had changed to be able to be working with the cluster based on the trust to also be non-competitive. So what we saw as an outcome was that new collaborative platforms, new collaborative initiatives were enabled to be developed based on the trust and the community that we have grown within the cluster and the ecosystem. Next slide. In addition to working on this virtual cluster and this cluster organization, we also worked on a more physical cluster. So together with a really visionary property developer, a real estate company, we also saw that given the collaboration we had within the cluster, we also saw that we were also growing a physical cluster around this cluster organization. So right now, I'm currently based, you can see my logo hat in the middle there, so there's where I'm sitting here today. But we also saw that this is not something that's developed over 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years. It took us in the city of Bergen actually 30 years to develop this physical cluster. So I think this is some key message and learnings from the last slide, Christian, is that it's really important that we also are patient and really important that we onboard a real estate that actually is aligned with the vision of the city and also have the capital and patience to invest. Last slide. So some key learnings. First of all, really important to have that clear industry leadership. In starting up with the cluster, I always put industry leaders on front, on stage, advocating for the initiative. That was really, really important to see that, that this was a really in need from the industry. Secondly, as I mentioned, really need to have a real estate developer that's aligned with the vision and has the patience and capital to develop this. The facilitator capabilities, also hugely important. This is not something that automatically happens itself. You really need a good facilitator to bring all these stakeholders together and really nudge them, encourage them, and really growing that trust within the community and be the community builder. And that's also really important to ensure the support from the community. It's so impressive how we now see the Ocean initiative here, having that support from the local mayor. It's really important that this initiative has a support from both from the local community, the regional community, the national community, and I will also say also from the global community, the relevance of it. So that outward focus that Christian is really emphasizing on is so important to see how can this ocean initiative that we are currently working on be relevant to a wider audience and to a wider global economy. So for that, I wish you all the best of luck with the workshop today and look forward to our discussions. Thank you.
Tanya, thank you very much. I have one question for you before we move on. What is your biggest expectation to this workshop today and tomorrow?
My biggest expectation is that we definitely find what is the collaborative areas we really want to achieve together. It's not about what's only important for me as a CEO in a company, but what will be good for a larger picture of that. So I think that really trying to identify both the collaborative areas that will be both for the entire community, but also be good for the revenue of the individual company. So having both of those topics in their mind.
Wonderful. And Tanya, you will be with us, of course, both today and also tomorrow, right?
Yes, looking forward to that.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Tanya. We're gonna go back to BC. We're gonna go back to you guys. We're gonna put you in your first breakout pilot. It's really just a warm-up format, but I wanna share one observation with you. So I've been working again on these kind of ecosystems and cluster initiatives in many countries, and there's one pattern that we see, and I think this is really, really important. And Alex, you brought that up very clearly in our conversation. It is what I call the geographic scope of economic ambitions, and that means that when we are developing this Ocean Futures Innovation Initiative, what is our focus? What is our geographic scope? Now, you could say that this is a regional. We really just care about the western coast of Canada, or maybe just the city of Victoria. And our main challenge and our main focus is to build local trust, local collaboration, and local partnership. And that's difficult enough. Or you could say, you know, at a minimum, we need to make sure that we cover both coasts. And I'm very happy. I know we have Dawn and several people joining us from the Ocean Supercluster Initiative and the Ocean Startup Initiative, because obviously we need to connect the entirety. You know, with the world's longest ocean coastline, clearly you must think national, but building trust across these wide regions is difficult. Activating partners and investors and startups and scale-ups and research initiatives across countries is difficult. Or you could say, you know, we need to think global. We need to think and plan and design globally from day one. And that means that you need to tie into the Icelandic ocean cluster. It means you need to tie very closely in with many of the Norwegian ocean clusters. It means that you need to tie into some of the leading ocean-based accelerators around the world. It means that you need to tie into the global venture funds, family offices for funding. So when you're trying to raise money for startups, you don't go to Vancouver or Toronto. You go to Oslo, you go to Melbourne, and you go to Paris, because that just makes sense. And I really encourage you to think about this in your upcoming discussion. You know, what is our focus? Local, regional, national, or global? Because that is really going to play a part. Now, it also has consequences. So if you say, you know, of course we should think global. Well, half the people on your board need to be from outside Canada. Half the people you employ need to be from outside Canada. You need to build that global ambition into the structure from day one. And think about, you know, where would we like to be? Are we thinking locally? Are we thinking nationally? Or are we thinking globally? And on that, we're going to put you into the first breakout session. Now, this is a bit of a test. It's a bit of a first time setup. We have a really good sort of back end staff here with Robin from Urban Systems and Adelina from our side. So what's going to happen now is that we're going to put you in the first expectation. You're going to be introduced to a team leader. And the team leader is going to guide you through a very simple exercise with your name, and your expectations. Now, this is not going to go flawlessly. There's always a bit of trouble. Somebody's going to go get lost on the way. Somebody's going to lose their computer on their heads. Somebody's going to run out of Wi-Fi. Stuff happens. But the majority of you are going to be just fine. So we're going to put you into the breakout rooms, Adelina, and then we're going to give you 10 minutes for introductions and expectations. So we'll see what happens. And if you have any problems, you can just wave your hand and somebody's going to wave back at you, and we'll see what happens from there. Good luck, 10 minutes. Adelina?
Thank you. Sending you all into the rooms now.
Are you there?
What do you think, Mayor? Is that a good crash course tomorrow?
Oh my goodness, that was crazy. My brain is exploding, but now I know how to move stickies around and write my name. So it's kind of like Myro kindergarten.
You know, we have done this with probably thousands of people over, this COVID period, and it is just amazing to see the mastery curve going from where do I press the button to completely getting it in really a record time.
And just looking at the participants to see how many, okay, we maybe lost 7 people. We were at 95 when we went out to breakout rooms. So hopefully people didn't run away because they got scared of Myro.
We have what I call emails and phone calls to get in the way, but that's fine. They'll bounce back. So welcome back, everyone. So you all just passed the initial trial by training. So what you're seeing right now is what we call the entire workspace. So we have here 10 groups, and you're all spread into those, split into those groups. And we're going to be working in those groups largely for the duration of day number 1 and day number 2.
Sorry.
Now,
Could you-
Roberto, how many people did we have in Costa Rica recently?
Yeah, we had around, I would say 65 to 70.
So about 65 to 70 people, and just like you guys, starting and then learning as we go. Now I'm going to zoom in to show you. So right now you're working on what we call canvas number 1. And as we proceed today and tomorrow, you're going to be working through these different canvases. Some of them are very easy and your team leader will do all the work. And some of them are open for you to get really hands-on. Now you can surf through this whole session without even touching Myro. That's fine. Or if you want to, you can get in there and you can have as many sticky notes and you can have as many Post-its as you like, and you can play with all the colors of the rainbow. The point is, this is your workspace. And as we get into tomorrow, you'll really start getting the hang of this. And we're going to be having a lot of fun seeing the progress as we proceed.
Bye.
Now I'm going to introduce briefly the high topic before we put you back out. And when we put you back into the Myro, the breakout groups, your team leader is going to be facilitating that session very actively. So talking very briefly about what we call the opportunities in the ocean space. Now, we mentioned this initially. We worked with many economies and regions around the world on these questions. And there are numerous white papers, there's numerous analysis, there's numerous reports indicating the value of the ocean economy. Today, of course, we're also starting to see what we call the innovation engines come to life. We have Catapult Ocean. They have a pipeline of more than 1,500 ocean startups all around the world. We have a program that we started and built in Norway where we build ocean startups from scratch. This is what's called a venture builder. So we get people together and we bring in the big companies to understand the big problems and the big challenges of the big companies. And then we build companies to solve those problems. This is called a venture builder. And then we have Hatch. Hatch is a global aquaculture accelerator. They have locations in Hawaii, in Norway, in Singapore. They have operations in Ireland. And I would love to see them have operations with you guys as well in Western Canada. And of course, we don't have to go very far. Washington State, the blue economy, this is a really, really, really well done background and strategy document. And we've met with the team and we followed the work of Washington State, and it's really impressive to see what they've done and what they've mapped out. And I think as we now start developing what is the ocean economy for us, you know, you can look to no further than Washington State to copy and learn what they've done. And possibly some of you have had a chance to read this. Personally, I thought this was a perfect opinion piece. Kendra McDonald, CEO of the Ocean Supercluster, and what she put in this opinion just a few days ago was really a very thoughtful reflection of the economic opportunities. And the big question that we're going to get into is, what does that mean to us? What does that mean to us?
Sorry?
And we're going to get you ready for the next breakout session. And the focus here is Western Canada, ocean economy in 2030. So this has two pieces or two elements. So in your groups, you're going to find a canvas called What is the Ocean Economy in 2030? And you should have 3 post-its. Each post-it has maximum 1 word, 1 word only. So your team leader can handle this, your team leader can put it in. And those 3 words should give you what is the high-level ocean economy towards 2030. That's a pretty easy one. The next one, which is a little bit more complex, but again, you have a very active team leader, and as you guys get more mastery of Miro, you can get hands-on yourself. This is the question, what are the key sectors for us? So we have the ocean economy as the big umbrella topic, but what are the key sectors? Now, this is the kind of analysis that we would potentially do sort of more on a research base, but now you guys can do it in your collaborative space. So the canvas we have here is based on a very simple setup. It has what is going to create new jobs towards 2030. So if you're moving this way, there's a high job creation. If we're moving this way, it's a low job creation. Maybe more importantly is what we call the value creation per employee or per person. So if you're staying down here, you have a relatively low value creation per person. And moving increasingly this way, you have a much higher value creation per person. That means that these low job, low value industries ideally should be phased out. These niche sectors, for example, software engineering, for example, artificial intelligence for offshore industries, those are relatively niche potentially, but they're important. The ones that end up over here, we ideally try to move to what we call more knowledge-driven work. And then we should be able to map out, and this is really what we're looking for. This is the goal right here. What are the key industries of the future for us? These are the industries that we need to sort of lift up and support and enable over the next 10 years. Now, on the side of your board, your team leader has a large number of cards. You can take as many, and it's a drag and drop exercise. You can take as many as you want, or only one if you want. For example, you may say that shipbuilding is going to be the industry of the future. Well, you drag and drop that over and job done. Or you can start getting into all of these. So this is a really interesting exercise with the purpose of helping you define what are the industries of the future. You don't have to use all the cards. Your team leader will facilitate this very actively. And on that, Adelina, I think we're ready to go back in the groups and work on value creation in the ocean economy towards 2030. Thank you, Adelina. We can set it up.
All right, we're going back.
Uh-oh,
It's very jarring sometimes.
very jarring.
Just got kicked out, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where your team leader needs to give you this sort of soft exit. Like we have 3 seconds, and you're out. Rick Rasmussen, could I ask you just a question? How did your discussion go?
Went well. It took us a little bit. We were exploring the board to start, and so I was explaining some things about ecosystem development and so on. But once we got into the exercise, I think now we're starting to get the hang of it. The learning curve on Miro is increasing for sure.
It's great, yeah. But
yeah, and then we were trying to debate about job creating industries versus not, value creation versus not, and I think we're right in the middle of that. I think another good 5 more minutes, maybe as many as 10 more minutes would have done us well. But I feel like we're making headway.
Oh, I mean, we're definitely making headway. I'm super impressed by the groups that I get a chance to visit. But Rick, I want to ask you, you work with a lot of governments and ecosystems, and you teach this at Berkeley, in Palo Alto or Silicon Valley. What was your biggest takeaway from the discussion we just had?
First off, that the people that we're working with are all subject matter experts.
Yeah.
That they're cognizant of what's going on in their environment, and even though we're having small debates overall, I think we're all headed in the same direction. So as a first session, that's really good to see, is that, and I think we're, like I said, we're making headway is the one way I can think about it, is that I think as we close out today and tomorrow, there will be a good consensus on the overall direction of where we're headed.
Perfect. Thank you. Tanya, maybe we can loop back to you and the mayor. What was the single biggest sort of industry that emerged? I know it's a difficult question because you had so many cards.
Maybe I will let the mayor first present her view on that.
Well, we had a lot of cards in the industries of the future. So I think part of our challenge is going to be to narrow down as a collective, as all of us on these workshops for the next couple of days. Because if there was not focus, I think there was some agreement about what could be phased out and some agreement about the niche, but a lot in that upper corner.
Yeah,
definitely. And we had a really good discussion on trying to do what we actually meant behind the industries, because even though we maybe said that tourism is not maybe a part, that the existing tourist industries may be a part of the future industries, but it could be a part on a niche developed tourism in the future again. So it's also a little bit about how you define the different industries, and also how we need to maybe reshape the future industries of the ocean economy.
Thank you. I want to frame a question to Eric of the Ocean Startup Initiative. Eric, I know you're sort of knee deep and in mapping out and getting to know all the startups, all the ocean startups throughout Canada. So, based on what you have seen in sort of the national ocean startup landscape, how does that match with the discussions you guys had?
Yeah, I think at least our group, and I was perusing some of the other groups to see how we landed, and it's quite similar in general themes. I think it's a good fit. We're seeing a lot of things in software, AI, machine learning, digitization, and we just bundled that all into the software box. Yeah. One of the things, there's a little bit of a push and pull between big interest in sustainability, which covers a lot of topics, and will be certainly important in the future in the next 10 years. But then there's also always a big push on Navy and defense. And that's not necessarily part and parcel with sustainability, but in terms of big revenue generating, requiring a lot of ocean tech in the next 10, 20, 30 years, and probably a lot of new jobs, there's that as well.
Yeah. Cool. Now, my experience is when we have these discussions that we're having, we have 10 groups, we have about 90 people. We're not going to finish them today. We're not going to finish them tomorrow, but we're going to shape them, focus them as we get into the session tomorrow. But this was great. And Rick, just like you said, I'm seeing mastery of Miro just go through the roof. If anybody wants to stay behind and practice their Miro, you can stay as long as you want. The next topic that we have today, and really just building on what Alex said in the opening, building on what the mayor said in the opening, building on, I know many of you have been involved with this, is, all right, so we have this sort of big picture. We have all of these, maybe too many, Tanya, all of these different industries that we're seeing. But what do we actually want to build in Victoria? That's the focus for the next 28 minutes. And I think that, the ball is rolling. South Island Prosperity Partnership with Dallas and his team, they've already started this. Throughout our other initiatives like this, it takes leadership. Someone has to get the ball rolling, but then the rest of you got to come in and sort of support. And I think, just like the mayor said in the opening, there are so many exciting pieces here. We have the Arts and Innovation District with the city transformation. That is going to take time. We have the Ocean Futures Innovation Hub, which is the building of buildings. Now, that can move quite quickly. We have the Ocean Futures Innovation Cluster, which I would call the operating organization. We have the startups and scale-ups, and Julie Angus has been talking very passionately about the potential if we can just organize and unlock some of these startups and scale-ups. And then, of course, we have all of these growth industries that we're seeing. We really want to pull all of that together. Robin or Jerome, do you guys want to touch very briefly on these three pictures we have in terms of the locations?
I can speak to that, Christian.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah, so I think in the context of the Ocean Futures Innovation Hub in Victoria, one of the objectives of our work is to also identify a potential site or sites which could support such an organization. Part of this work that we're doing today is to try and understand what are the needs of industries in terms of physical space and a location. Is it water access? Is it a certain amount of square footage? Is it a certain type of building? But also thinking about how this can be a long-term solution as well. So thinking about the potential need to phase such a development over time. So the opportunity to maybe start smaller and expand from there. So in our work, we've identified a number of sites around what's being referred to as the Arts and Innovation District in the city of Victoria. For those who know Victoria, it's kind of just to the north of downtown, kind of focused around the Rock Bay area off the gorge. And in there, we've identified a number of sites, some of which have, through our initial exploration have yielded some more, fruitful opportunities, at least in the short term, and others that might require more investment and long-term thinking around in order to develop. So from here, we're just kind of looking over the Point Hope shipyard, I believe, looking down towards the gorge. This is currently an industrial site used for ship repair and maintenance. If we keep going through the slides, maybe I'll kind of show some of the highlights. So this is looking through the breezeway next to Capital Iron. Again, for those who don't know Victoria, this is in that Arts and Innovation District to the north of downtown. The site is currently occupied by a number of retail buildings, some of which might be vacant, in the future, and allow for the opportunity for kind of moving into existing development in the short term. This site also has access to the ocean. As you can see here, there's a breezeway that connects down and a large kind of flat surface area right adjacent to the gorge there. There's opportunity here to, put up temporary buildings, module buildings, as well as connect to or expand kind of existing buildings that are there if they become vacant. Maybe we can keep flipping through. So this is referred to as the Tulia holding sites. So this is currently owned by, in partnership by the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. It's had extensive remediation over the last 5 years. I think a cost of something around $120 million. So this site is currently vacant. It's a bit of a blank slate. This would be one of those options for, potential future expansion, or if there was to, if through this process we saw the need to kind of look to build something from scratch. But again, we can think about all these as potential opportunities and kind of put them into a phased approach as well. So that's something we're hoping to explore with you today as well. Is that the final slide for this one, Chris?
Yeah, it is. Sean, we have much more on the real estate tomorrow, but I have one question for you. If everything falls into place, how quickly could we get up and running with, a temporary building or a temporary site, do you think, all things falling into place?
Yeah, so there's two sites that we've, one that we haven't highlighted here. Again, we can get into more details about that tomorrow, but, the potential sites that already have existing buildings that will have vacant office space, vacant space available. Those could become, quickly realities in early 2021 if we were to kind of say pull the trigger very quickly and kind of be clear about what we want from the Ocean Futures Innovation Hub. Then there could be some of that ready-made office space with some potential to expand as well. So the second slide we showed there has some good opportunities to kind of expand towards the water and actually have that water access, as well as some existing vacant office space as well. So something like that could be, easily achievable in the very close future in 2021 as kind of those initial steps. And then, as I said before, we can start thinking about some of these other sites as phasing goes on. So it all depends on what the needs of the stakeholders are and some of the inputs from the group here as well. There is another vacant site that we've evaluated as well too, but we can talk about that tomorrow.
Yeah. Sean, you said something really important. You said the needs of the stakeholder, and we can't emphasize this enough, that this can't end up being just a real estate development project like any other real estate development project. It has to be, and I see Tanya is sort of shaking her head. It has to be like really led and driven by the key people. And the picture that Tanya showed from Bergen, Norway, I mean, that was such a deep collaboration to develop that. Charles, I see you have your hand up. We have time for a quick question before we proceed. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious about other locations that have potentially been considered. This has been brought up in prior discussions and hasn't really been addressed, but like things like Dockside or the Roundhouse are potentially perfectly legitimate sites as well. And I'd love to hear some thoughts around that.
I have one question too. Like when everybody talks about innovation, they always focus on infrastructure, brick and mortar, building things, building sites. And they always leave the funding for innovation either last or minimal, where we've identified that software and autonomy and all these other things are the top right of your corner, which really the funding I think has to go into some sort of collaboration or even online or virtual hub than brick and mortar infrastructure, because you always end up with this amazing statue to the gods that really has no innovation within it. So,
and no one can pay for it.
That's right.
Scott, I don't know what you do, but you're drafted. I mean, that is such an important point. It is probably the #1 point that we address. You know, the buildings are the hardware, the people and the collaboration is the software. We need to have both. So Scott, you know, you're in this, whether you like it or not. Sean, I know we have more on the real estate tomorrow. We're also going to have the map, but maybe if you can touch on those things that were asked specifically.
Yeah, in terms of the sites, we have evaluated a number of other sites, and there's some that aren't off the table, so to speak. What we're trying to do, I guess, in this brief overview is just provide some high-level examples of the types of sites that we're looking at, and it's again tied more to the needs of the stakeholders here. Is this as you said, Scott was saying, or is this the construction of a major building, or is it more focused on that innovation piece and starting small and expanding from there? I think we really want to understand, and from there we can really tailor the site that the program that we're looking for to what the stakeholders' needs are. So this is exploratory at this point, and yes, there are other sites we have looked towards Dockside and others. Ocean access was, from our preliminary review, considered an important feature for the site, so that does kind of limit the number of sites in this area in particular if we want to kind of focus on the other positive aspects of creating an ocean futures innovation hub in Victoria, is that ability to kind of build an arts innovation district and think about the process of renewing some urban areas or increasing industry and job creation in some areas of north of downtown Victoria.
And if I can just add an answer to Scott's question, this is really meant to be a quick, easy win. What can we get up and running in the next, 6 to 12 months? No statues to gods or big shiny buildings. That might come later if the innovation that we create is really successful. But really, this is about big companies and small companies and having that collaborative ecosystem that is in a place, whether it's shipping containers or an empty heritage building. But what happens inside and around and on the ocean is that's the thrust, not the building.
Cool, and that's going to lead perfectly up to our next part. We're going to prepare you for the last breakout session. And I just got to tell you guys that I would love to keep you here for 8 hours. I know you guys have other things to do, so we got to cap it at 2. We're going to introduce you to something we call the pre-assessment card. I'm going to give you just a super quick case study from Asia. So what we would like you to do, and this is Rick, this is really going to push the Miro mastery right through the roof, because you can work at many different aspects at the same time. Problem statement: what are we hoping to solve? What is the current economic context? What kind of aspirations do we have towards the future? And very specifically, and very, very specifically, when we start looking at building out the hub here, who are the key leaders that we need to involve? Who are the industry leaders, the government leaders, the entrepreneurs, investors, and academics? What goals do we hope to achieve, and how do we propose to design this? That is your next discussion when we start building our own solutions. We're going to scope it down and get really specific. I don't expect you to agree, but I want you to discuss, and I want you to put divergent perspectives on the board, because that's going to feed our discussion for tomorrow. So don't focus too much on being in agreement. Just get stuff on there, and we're going to keep working on it tomorrow. So notice here that I've highlighted 2 areas in pink. In case you feel you're running out of time, make sure that you have more focus on those 2 categories that goes towards aspirations and role. That's what I would like you to discuss next in the next breakout session. So Adelina, we're going to put them into the next breakout. We got about 15 minutes, 15 minutes in this, and then we're right on time for today's program. Let's go ahead for the last breakout session.
So we left in really good, cool discussions. I felt really bad.
Welcome, welcome back, everyone. So I have seen many groups saying, I would love to continue the conversation, or I wish we had more time. And of course you do, because this isn't going to finish anytime soon. I hope this is a conversation that can continue and a project that can continue to build. Tanya, if you're going to summarize your discussion in about 20 seconds, that's all you have, 20 seconds to summarize this board, what would you say?
We really were focusing on writing. So to be quite honest, Chris, I haven't really had the capacity either to look. I was so focused on really getting these post-it and sticky notes to it. But as you can see, we try to cover all areas of it. But I think that there's some key words going on. It's collaboration. It's about attracting talents, and it's also about building a resilient economy for the region and the ocean industries.
Thank you. And thank you to all the participants. Now, this board is going to stay open, so you are free to roam around and you can read what's on everybody else's boards. So if you're interested, there's tons of discussion and content going on here, and we're going to pick up on those tomorrow. Now, just as we're about to close out, I would like to ask the team leaders to stay behind for just a few minutes. And for you guys, as you are leaving the building, so to speak, I would invite you to, and we're not going to go in the breakout rooms, you can just do this yourself on the way out, to write up one key summary from today's session. We don't expect a lot, we don't expect very much, but if you feel like giving one sort of feedback, just scroll down on your screen, grab one of the post-its and leave a quick message as you're leaving. And then I hope to see everyone here tomorrow. And Mayor, do you want to say just a few closing words before we wrap up today's session?
Sure. Yeah, I want to thank everyone for participating. Some people have already indicated that they have to run off to their next meeting, which I think is the case for all of us. But thanks to those of you who spent the time with us today. I encourage you to come back tomorrow. I know that we've had some folks from Western Diversification here from the Government of Canada, and really just want to thank the federal government. We had all the logos up at the beginning, but a special shout out to the federal government for their help in supporting this phase of the Ocean Futures Innovation Hub development. We've got funding from the Canadian government through Western Diversification to do this work. So thanks to them for joining us, and importantly, thanks to them for funding this work. And we'll see well, I will actually be in Bonn, Germany tomorrow morning, virtually, speaking at a Daring Cities conference. So I wish you all the best, and we'll catch up with this work as it continues to unfold.
Thank you very much. And Jan, thank you for the first feedback. So on that note, we're going to wrap up. I welcome everyone back tomorrow. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your input. And thank you to all the team leaders. And I'll see you tomorrow. All the best.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.